And welcome back to my channel. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite movies, mostly horror, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And we're going to take a little trip into one of my favorite places, which is Indie Land. I love independent horror, independent films, and so I always try to spotlight them. Like I did with Exploited, I am now going to do another one that was fantastic, and that was Deer Camp 86. This was so good. I love this movie. It was so funny, and yet it was so kind of scary, and it just played wonderful. I would love to have that poster. That would be a cool poster to have. So, Deer Camp was released in 2022, but it was released on physical just now in 2024. So you can get this now, and I immediately got it. I don't know where it was released. Was it released at the theaters? Was it released on one of those shitty streaming services? I don't know where it was released. I just know it was released in 2022, but it did not get a Blu-ray release until 2024. So this is brand new. I really loved the sound of it, the trailer, the article, so I wanted it, and it was worth every penny. It was great. It is set in 1986, of course, Deer Camp 86. So the movie opens with you seeing a bunch of articles and news reports about missing hunters over the past few years, missing hunters, backpackers, things like that have gone missing in the area, alongside murdered indigenous and native women. So you have these stories and articles about missing indigenous and native women, and then these missing hunters and backpackers, right? And that's when we are then introduced. That's when we are then introduced to our team of dipshits, which is the only way you can refer to them, really. And that is Egbert, whom is my favorite character, actually, in this movie. Yes, his name is Egbert. And we have Wes and Simon and JD and Buck. Oh my God, Buck. Oh my God. And Carlos. So they're on a trip in this ridiculous big Bronco looking thing in which they have hit a deer, and they have it strapped to the roof, and so it's like bleeding all over the car. That was like, they're having to use the windshield wipers because the idiots put the head at the top of the windshield, so all the blood, it was retarded. So these idiots are all headed to Deer Camp. It's something that they do every year. Wes, though, has not been with them in the last 2 years. So he's finally back with the crew and coming back. And Carlos is the new member of the little hunting party. They go to a celebration, I guess, called Deer Camp, where there are various cabins, and I guess they rent one every year, or one of their dads owns one. I can't remember how I think they just rent it. But so they're on their way to this Deer Camp for the 1986 season. And they stop at the local bar, which is called Murphy's Peace Pipe, and do various bar things. They are, of course, completely surrounded by the most stereotypical Deliverance-type rednecks you have ever seen in your life. And the bartender is a girl named Star. She's really cool, too. So they hang around in there and they do all this stuff. The dialogue in this movie is what will get you, because it is so politically incorrect. It is so 1986. Simon even has one of those toys, the four lights, and you repeat back what the lights do. Simon Says type game. I remember those. It's like a Rubik's Cube, you know what I mean? So he keeps playing one of them and irritating Buck. But yeah, the dialogue is absolutely hilarious in this movie. So Wes, he's kind of got a crush on Star already. And these rednecks, of course you know what happens. Of course they end up in a fight. And there are very, obvious racial slurs used against them. I mean, because Simon is black. Carlos is Latino. So you can imagine what they call them. And the soundtrack is fantastic. I mean, the theme song for this movie is Everybody Wants You by Billy Squier. So come on. This is 86 rock soundtrack. It's really cool. So, you got Billy Squier blasting Everybody Wants You at this bar. And there's this big, huge fight. She puts an end to it, though, with a shotgun. Star does. And so everything calms down. She makes the rednecks leave when she goes out back to take a cigarette break. Now, he had commented on her necklace, and she's like, yeah, it was my grandmother's. It's this beautiful beaded Indian, Native American artwork necklace. So she goes out back to have a cigarette break, where she is promptly attacked, you assume, by one of those rednecks, right? Because of what she said to them. One of the rednecks was named Buford, which made Buck, like, Buford, of course, Buford. I bet all of you motherfuckers are named Buford. And I was like, well, no, there was probably a Bocephus in there too. I mean, I love Buford T. Pusser. And I love Buford T. Justice and Smokey and the Bandit. And I love Buford T. Pusser and Walking Tall. The real Walking Tall. Not that, whatever that rock shit was. But, yeah. So I was like, Buford is definitely a redneck name. But don't forget Bocephus. And never forget Bubba. You know what I mean? So, but anyway, it's funny. The dialogue between everybody, especially remembering it's 1986, is absolutely hilarious. So she gets murdered, and even Wes is like wanting to leave a note for her, and so he leaves a note for her, and they are all drunk, and so they leave and they go to their cabin, and they get up the next day, and like I said, you will just be bombarded by the most interesting dialogue that I have heard in a long time. It is so stereotypical. It is so gross. It is so toxic that it is great. I mean, it's like each one of them is basically a caricature, but it's done in such a way that it doesn't really bother you. You're like, oh my God, I hate all of these guys, but I like all of these guys. It's really weird. But, especially Buck, is this big fat guy who drinks 40 beers a day. It is hilarious. So they split up and go on their first day's hunt, right? And you start to see, because you saw the murder, which was a pretty rough murder. She, they attempted to rape her, but she fought back. Or whoever was attacking her was attempting to rape her, but she fought back. Her necklace was ripped off, and she was stabbed in the side of the head with a butcher knife, or a knife that went all the way in her ear. It was a very horrific death. And that's what the first time you saw anything supernatural is that when she was killed, her necklace on the ground started doing some weird thing like it was alive. And because if I forgot to tell you, this is a supernatural paranormal horror movie. Yeah, well, it's a paranormal horror slasher because all the kills are slasher-esque. It's just a paranormal entity that's doing them. So they're all out on their hunt, and this hilarious dialogue is going on between them. And I just love Egbert because he's always like gagging, and he's like, it's not that he's dumb as a rock, but he doesn't have a very high IQ. It's not that he's dumb as a rock, it's that he is completely out of his element. You know what I mean? You know, it's like, I'm not eating that. I mean, he's just hilarious. So they're all out there doing the hunting thing. You do kind of get freaked out a little because they all split up, you know, like two of them, one of them, two of them. And they all seem to like keep hearing something, seeing some little vision of something out there in the woods, you know. And right as one of them started to get a deer, there's this big horn blow and stuff like that, and they all run back to the camp, to the cabin, thinking that somebody had something bad happen to them, only to find the sheriff. Now, we had just seen a scene with the sheriff where he was talking to his deputy when they came and told him about finding Star's body behind that bar. And he's like, uh-oh, get ready for a lot of bear attacks. And the deputy was like, what? And then he brought out these files, and he started showing all of these horrible pictures of these dead and raped and mutilated Native American girls. And then he also showed him all of these pictures of these dead and mutilated hunters and backpackers. And he then informed, you know, when the deputy was looking at them pictures, which they show you this stuff, he's like, what in God's name did that? And he goes, a bear. He pointed to the cause of death, and undetermined had been scratched out, and bear attack had been written in. And he looked at the deputy and he said, a bear attack? It's always a bear. And the deputy looked at him funny, and he asked him where was he going. And the sheriff said, I'm going to go try to prevent any more bear attacks. And you're like, the fuck was all that about? So the horn blows, the guys all go back to the cabin, and it's the sheriff there, and he's like, you know, got this note here, who's Wes? All of that. He determines pretty quickly that they didn't have anything to do with it, you know. And Wes is hit really hard when the sheriff says that the bartender named Star was found murdered behind the bar, and it really like hurt his feelings, you know. I guess he really liked her, you know what I mean. And he sized them all up. And I think he determined, you know, and Buck, he like wasn't playing because he was like, why don't you go talk to them cousin fucking rednecks, you know, because she threw them out with a shotgun and stuff like that. And he's like, I already did. Thank you very much. But he was like, y'all don't understand, you know, all the time, every year, you city folk come down here to the woods, our girls go missing, and then a bunch of you end up dead. That's all I'm saying, you know. So he sort of kind of gave them that warning, but he sized them up, and I think he could tell that they didn't have nothing to do with it. And so he just gave them that little warning and was like, take care now and respect the woods. You know what I mean? So they were all a little, because all of them liked her. She was a really cool character. So all of them really liked her, and so they went out to a field together and shooted? is shooted a word? If you go on a trap shoot, what is the past tense? Shot? Usually it would be shot. You shoot the person you shot a deer. Past tense. But if you go on a trap shoot, which is a thing, what is the past tense of a trap shoot? Anyway, they went and trap shooted beer cans in honor of Star as a little memorial to this girl they only met for one night. So they're out there and they're trap shooting, which is hilarious. That's hilarious too. When once again they see something off in the distance, and you're already aware that something paranormal, supernatural is going on in these woods. Because aside from all of the hilarious banter and dialogue that is making you laugh, there's also a lot of creepy vibes, and there's also the sounds. I swear you keep hearing Predator. You know the clicking sound that the Predator makes? You keep hearing something very similar to that, and it's not the same, but it's very, very similar to the way the Predator sounded, that click. My brother has that on his phone as his ringtone, and he'll be sitting here sometimes, and that fucking ringtone will go off. The click the Predator, and it scares me every fucking time, and I'm like, what the fuck is up with you and the goddamn Predator sound? Don't you know that a horror movie fan in the middle of the night hearing the Predator sound is going to upset them for a moment? It's just rude. But yeah, my brother has that sound on his phone as his ringtone. But you keep hearing something like that in the woods, so you definitely know some shit's up. Well, after they do their trap shooting and have trap shooted, they go back to the cabin and then go on their hunt again because they want dinner. That's their celebration. They want to kill a deer. So they go out hunting again. Carlos does manage to kill one. They get it back to the thing and clean it, and we have to eat the heart. Hunters, I just don't get it. But we have to eat the heart because we are toxic men. We have to kill the beast, and we have to eat its heart. Sounds rather serial killerish to me if you want to know my opinion on that shit. But okay. So they cook the heart of this deer, and they're trying to get Egbert to eat a piece of it, which is not going well because he can't stop his gag reflex. And then all of a sudden, when all of them have a piece of the heart in their mouth, like all of a sudden it tastes funny, and they like all spit it out in their hands, and it's covered in maggots. And you're like, well, where the fuck did that come from? You know what I'm saying? So, like, the supernatural element of this movie really starts to ramp up at this point. They keep talking about there's something out there. Where am I at? I mean, I know where I'm at in my head, but where am I at in my notes? Okay. That's what I get for not following the notes. So, that night, they go to sleep that night, after the maggot heart. They go to sleep that night, and they get up the next day, and their kill is gone. The deer that was hanging there, it's gone. They get very upset, thinking it's those rednecks, right? So they all go together this time, hunting for the rednecks. So they go out there, they're hunting for them, and they can't find it. They can't find anything, can't find any of them. And back at camp again, Carlos is just all of a sudden shot with a big arrow out of the blue, just like goes right through him. Freaks everybody out. At which point, they like have to push it through. Don't pull it out. You got to push it through. So they have that scene. That pisses them off even more, that they go out hunting for them rednecks again, right? So they're out in the woods hunting for these people, because now not only did they steal their deer, but they actually shot Carlos, when all of a sudden Egbert is talking to him about something. He's saying something stupid as usual, which is hilarious. When all of a sudden it looks like he stepped into a rope trap, a spring trap, and this rope tightens around his legs, and he falls to the ground, and it gets pulled off in front of them, and they're like, and they kind of run after him, but he's being pulled faster than they can, so he gets out of sight through the woods. And when they kept following the trail, and when they get to him, he has strung up between two trees, and this is all just within a couple of minutes, right? So he is strung up between two trees, and I'm like, why did y'all kill Egbert? He was my favorite, But they go up to him like, dude, are you all right? And stuff like that. And they walk around on the front, and he's been cut open, and his heart's gone, and he's disemboweled, and it's all on the ground. And that was really gross. But that wasn't the worst. Because after they're standing there stunned, looking at this, all of a sudden he like moves, and his head pops up, and his tongue is hanging like completely out. And he then finally dies. I think it's because it happened so fast. So his head falls back down, and the tongue falls out on top of all the guts on the ground, and it was like pretty disturbing. So Egbert has been killed, and now they know that the shit is not fun and games. They're all looking around and stuff like that when they see that apparition again. And each time you see this thing, whatever it is, that's making the predator type noise and stuff, whenever you see that, you see a little bit more of it each time it makes an appearance. And so you're like, okay, well, that's something fucking fucked up looking. They all run back to camp because they're scared to death now, right? Now, Simon, he had already given this shit up. He had already took off in the woods a while back, and Wes couldn't stop him. Like, you're going to get lost. And he was like, I'm out of here. I'm going back to Detroit where it's safe. So he's actually gone. But the rest of them, they get back because they're like going to go now too. And then you see the truck, right? This big giant Bronco. They try to get to the truck, and it like cranks up by itself. The wheels are locked, and it's being pulled by some force. And then it like flips up into the air and goes and is thrown through the woods and down the mountain like in front of them. This is a big giant white Bronco. You know what I'm saying? And whatever this entity is, it threw that truck all over the place and destroyed it. So, yeah. They don't know what to do now. They all end up going back into the cabin. They obviously know that something is really fucked up going. Whenever they go back outside, this thing actually appears to them, right? And we finally get to see the creature. And it is a very interesting looking thing. It's obviously some kind of demon, but in humanoid form. It's got all these robes on, and it's got, well, you see it. It's that thing. It's got this big weird skull mask. I mean, what is that a skull of? Is that a deer skull? Maybe I've just never seen a deer skull. But I don't know. It'd have to be a really big deer. It was like a moose or something, but it's that creature right there. So you finally get to see it like up close, and it throws this ancient tomahawk at them, and it misses them, and they all get back in there, and everything is just like full force paranormal activity now. You know, they're figuring it out. They try to make a trap, you know, because Carlos is like, oh, well, I remember back when I was in Lebanon, you know, we got inside of a metal building, and we hooked up a generator to it, and whenever somebody got him close and leaned up against the metal, you could turn on the generator, and it electrocuted them. And I'm like, well, that is a neat idea, you know. It's amazing I've never heard some criminal try that in a siege. But anyway, they decide to try to figure out how to do that. So they literally make themselves a cage out of bed springs, which was pretty ingenious for these idiots. But they get inside of this little makeshift cage that they've made, and they have the generator hooked up to it, thinking that that's going to stop a demon or something. I don't really know. And but it's true. It doesn't like it because it does come at them, and they do manage to get the generator going, and it does make it disappear. You know, I guess it gave it a little electromagnetic shock going there, so it does disappear, and they think, well, maybe this is a good thing. You know what I'm saying? But it just reappears and comes back in there. It just, because it's a fucking demon, for God's sakes. It just makes sure not to be material when it grabs the thing. Instead, it becomes translucent, and it just comes through the thing. And it goes in there and, like, kills Carlo ugly, like, with a hatchet to the back of the head. And then, of course, when he finally falls, he has to fall on his back, which makes the hatchet pop out his forehead. That was pretty gross. Get killed, guys. But so now that they have set this trap and it comes for them, Hatchet heads Carlos, they electrocute it again, and it seems to vanish again. And they all like, well, now we're going to do what Simon did, and that is we're getting the fuck out of here. We're just going to run. So they're running and running and running. And, JB was an asshole because Buck had been saying all of this time, because he's like the worst of them, but he had been saying, like, you know, every man for themselves, and the slowest, you know, that's who gets it, right? So while they're running, JB is in the rear, because for a fat guy, Buck can haul ass, is what I'm saying. And so JB is in the rear. He runs up on Buck and trips him. And Buck is like, what? And he's like, you're last in line. And Buck's like, oh, you fucking traitor. That's funny. And the thing gets him and kills him ugly. It kills all of them ugly. I mean, all of the kills in this movie are ugly. So JB and Wes, they managed to get to the Lake Manitoba, whatever, Lake Manitou, something like that, Lake Manitou, I think it was. So they get to the edge of the lake and they grab a boat, and they're like, we're going to go to the other side, and that thing is still coming. So they're paddling like Olympic shit, trying to get the hell away, and it jumps up out of the water and pulls Wes into the water. And you're like, oh man, I thought he was going to live. Whatever. But JB, he doesn't sit on his laurels for very long. So he gets to shore and runs up onto the shore and turns around, and that thing comes out of the water and it's like walking up to him. And he turns around and is like, who the fuck are you? What the fuck are you? What do you want? And then he steps in a bear trap. The bear trap from their cabin. So he screams and he's like stuck there and he's screaming like, what are you? What the fuck are you? And it takes the mask off. It takes that skull thing off. And it's fucking Star. The chick from the bar that was murdered. So immediately in my head, I'm like, oh, it's like a vengeance demon. The costume, whatever is the source of the power, the skull, the necklace, whatever it is. It like, oh, I get it. Do you get it? I get it. It's like every time some native girl is killed and murdered and raped and assaulted, the spirit makes hunters and backpackers pay for it. So it's sort of like a blood sacrifice, a vengeance sacrifice. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. I like that. But that wasn't the coolest part. The coolest part was when she looked in his eyes, you saw it was him. He's the one who murdered her. And in these flashbacks, you see that night again, and you see him murder her. Him in the bathroom cleaning the knife. Him pretending to be passed out on the toilet when Carlos came to check on him. And I'm like, motherfucker, I did not for 1 second see that coming. You know what I mean? I thought it was that Buford guy, to tell you the truth. And actually there were points in this movie, right? There were points in this movie where I was actually like, you know, I'm not really sure I agree with these guys being killed. They didn't do nothing. But then again, the Native American girls didn't do nothing either to get murdered. But, you know, I didn't understand. And yet now here you see this, that was JB was the one who murdered her. So it kind of like, I get it. Okay. All right. Didn't see that coming. Didn't know it was him. So once you see all of that, he's like calling her names and stuff like that. And she goes up and she kills him very, very ugly. So she goes up and kills him and says, "You'll take no more." When she like stabs him in the ear, like she had been stabbed, like he had stabbed her. She's like, "You'll take no more." That's the only thing that you heard her say through this, or the demon say through this whole movie. "You'll take no more." And it was when she said that, it all made sense. So Wes comes up out of the water. So obviously it hadn't killed him. He came up out the shore, and he looks and he's like, "Oh my God, I didn't know it was JB." And she appeared in front of him, you know, with her little magical teleportation thing. She appeared in front of him and like was choking him, and he was like, "I didn't know it was JB." And she felt of his heart and let him go. And he took off running. So he was pure of heart, I guess, and the demon let him go. Wes goes running, and he runs out into the road, at which point he literally almost runs into the sheriff's truck, the Bronco that's coming by. He jumps into the truck, and I'll be damned if Simon isn't there. The sheriff was on his way back to their cabin. Simon had finally gotten help, so Simon and Wes are still alive. And Simon looks at Wes and is like, "Where's the rest of it? You know, where's the rest? Where's everybody else?" And he's shook his head no. And Simon is like, "What happened? What happened?" And the sheriff says, "It was a bear. It's always a bear." And you're like, well, the sheriff knows about this vengeance demon, doesn't he? He's letting the land take care of vengeance about these murders. So that was pretty cool. We then flash forward and we see the bar again, but out there on the sign it says Deer Camp 2024. And you see some new assholeish acting guys come. They go into the bar. You see protesters out there about, Find Our Daughters, which I think this movie is dedicated to. The disappearance and murder of indigenous women and how it doesn't get attention like Gabby Petito or something because they're not a lily white blonde haired person, which I understand. I've seen documentaries on that. So the dude that gets out of the car, is like, yeah, I love animals. They taste good and stuff like that. And they tell him to suck a dick and shit like that. And he goes on into the bar and he's like, let's get this party started. And the girl behind the bar turns around and is like, what can I do for you? Welcome to Deer Camp 2024. And it's fucking Star. And you're like, oh, okay. So she's the demon all along. She's a demon. She's a vengeance demon. She's fucking Anya from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She's a vengeance demon. And I'm like, okay. So she just hangs out. Somebody tries to hurt her or hurt somebody she knows, or she takes vengeance on them. And I'm like, that's fucking cool. They could make a sequel or two out of that. You know what I mean? And I hope that they do. And so yeah, the movie ends when she says, welcome to Deer Camp 2024. And this is a fucking amazing film. Hats off to the writers. It was directed by L. Van Dyke Siboutszen. That is entirely your fault. I do not know what you people are doing with names. You do know that it only costs about $300, and you can completely change your identity legally with the Social Security Department. But L. Van Dyke Siboutszen. The writers were Bo Hansen and Riley Taurus. Taurus is a nice name. That's a nice last name, Taurus. It stars Noah LaLonde, Jay Bidwell, Arthur Cartwright. So it was very cool. Very good movie. I love the soundtrack. 80s rock, 86 rock, soundtrack. The dialogue was absolutely phenomenal in this movie. I laughed way more than once. I got to tell you about this scene. The funniest scene in the movie. Remember I told you that first night after the maggot in the meat? That night when the super paranormal shit really went into overdrive? The other guy had already started screaming. I think it was JB. Trying to, because he got woke up by Buck snoring. But Egbert started screaming, and they all come running to him. And you think it's part of the supernatural shit. Egbert is screaming, and they all come running up to him, and they're like, what's up, what's up? Well, while he's screaming, he's fucking taking off his pants. He's stripping off his pants. And you're like, well, what is he doing? And he's screaming about something had been crawling up his legs. Something was crawling up my legs. It's crawling up my legs. And he's screaming, and they all they get the flashlights, and they're like, you got to take them drawers off because we got to check something. Because if it's what I think it is. And so that poor boy has to sit there spread eagle like he's on a gynecological table. And they're looking, and they're like, oh, yep, there it is. And they actually show you the close-up of what appears to be a nutsack. And a deer tick had burrowed in to his nuts. And Carlos was going to have to operate because, Carlos was like, you can't pull it because it'll pull the head off in there. You got to dig it out with a knife. So they had to perform testicle surgery on this guy to get that deer tick off of him. That was hilarious. that whole thing. Can you imagine the dialogue that was going on? Everybody making fun of him and testicle talk and dug in like a deer tick and stuff. So the supernatural and horror aspects of this movie are phenomenal. But then you have this absolutely ridiculously good and offensive at the same time dialogue between all of these people that you won't be able to make up your mind. I mean, you're sitting there going, oh my God, I hate him. I hate him so much. And then you'll be like, but he's kind of cool to listen to. I mean, it's great. So if you've never heard of Dare Camp 86, it's an independent horror movie. If you've never heard of Dare Camp 86, you can look it up. You can buy it on. I think I got this at Amazon for like $14.99 or something. So it's reasonable. But this is a fantastic movie to have in your collection as a horror fan, and it's something new. It's something great. It's not the same old cliched story, and yeah, that'll do it. Dare Camp 86 from 2022/2024, because that's when this was released. It was released in 2022. It got a physical release on Blu-ray in 2024. And I will see you in the next thing. Love you, miss you. Bye-bye. Always remember, never forget, you're a very, very special person. Don't let anyone ever tell you different. Respect the woods. And check out findourdaughters.com, which is about that issue of missing Indigenous Native American women, and Canadian too. Indigenous Native women and the disappearance and how they're not paid attention to. Love you, miss you, bye-bye. Always remember, never forget. I already said all that. I will see you in the next one. Bye.